So I know I haven't talked about The Last of Us. I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but Critical Drinker also put a video out, so I'm like, let's watch that and talk about it, and we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. So we'll check out Critical Drinker's thoughts, and I'll kind of talk throughout and give you my thoughts on the overall series.
Well, gosh darn it. Sometimes modern entertainment manages to surprise even me. Usually in a bad way, to be fair. Like when you think fantasy shows can't possibly get worse than The Rings of Power, and then along comes the double whammy of Witcher, Blood Origin, and Willow.
And that one just got cancelled.
It was like a 1-2 punch from a boxer who dipped his gloves in human feces just before the fight. But at the other end of the spectrum was The Last of Us on HBO, a show that most fans of the games went into with about as much hope and enthusiasm as me at an AA meeting. Video game adaptations aren't exactly known as bastions of quality filmmaking, and the second game in The Last of Us franchise had left a sour taste in people's mouths. And yet, with each new episode, The Last of Us didn't just manage to hang in there, and actually seemed to get stronger and more popular.
I will say, like, I was a fan right from the start. I mean, like, I hadn't finished the game when I started watching the show. I finished the game after episode 6. I watched episode 6. I was like, I gotta hurry up and get through this. And I actually finished. So I get how some people were probably like, you know, a little bit worried for a moment. But episode 1 I thought was great. And 2 I thought was great. Like, everything up to 5 was fantastic. 6 was good. But 5 for me was like the best episode of the series. I have some issues with it, but he'll probably talk about it a little bit too, so we'll see.
My own assessment of the first 3 episodes was cautious optimism mixed with some lingering concerns about where it was all leading. Would it stick the landing, or would it crash and burn in spectacular fashion? Well, now that I've seen the whole season, let's take a look and see how it did. You've probably seen my previous review, so I'm not going to bore you to death with another detailed plot summary. The high-level version is as follows. Zombie mushroom virus takes over the world, and 20 years later, main character has to escort the girl who's the key to everything across the country to make a cure. They fight some bad guys, dodge some infected, and gradually get to know each other until they reach their destination, where the main character has to make a tough decision about the girl who's the key to everything.
Pretty much.
The 2 biggest questions about video game adaptations can basically be boiled down to, will it stay faithful to the source material, and if it does, will it actually do a good job adapting it? And the answer in this case is yes and yes.
Yeah.
Well, mostly at least. There's a few deviations and problems that I'll talk about in a minute, but for the most part, I think The Last of Us does a pretty good job adapting some challenging and complex source material and doing it in a way that seems mostly fair and balanced. The broad strokes of the game's story are all present and correct here, and some of the most memorable moments are replicated practically beat for beat.
That I thought was pretty dope. There's things that the show did better than the game. Like mainly episode 5. I can't remember the kid's name, but Henry and the brother, when what happens to them happens. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen the show yet, but if you play the game, you know what happens. I feel like the show depicted that in a much better way. Like, it was more impactful for me. Now, I don't know if it's because I watched the show first as far as those scenes, and then I played the game and got there, and I already knew what was going to happen. It might have felt a little bit different if I played it first and then saw this. Who knows? But I thought the show did that like masterfully as far as how it depicted those scenes. And then even the scenes like the giraffe here scene, the end scene in the show, like even like the moment with Joel going after Ellie when she's about to go through surgery. A lot of that I thought the show did very well. But if there's moments where it felt a little bit different because, again, it's an adaptation. You're not playing. So it does feel a little bit different. I'm wondering if he's going to kind of go there. We'll see.
Especially in the final episodes. The production values, the look and feel of the world, the emotional tone, and the performances are mostly spot on. And overall, I came away from it thinking, good job, HBO. Not perfect, but it could have been worse. A lot worse. Now, that being said, there's definitely some issues that I want to cover, mostly because they're issues that could have been avoided and hold the show back from being truly great. First and foremost of which is the pacing. The season's split into 9 episodes, the first of which are mostly there for backstory and world building. 2 more are devoted almost entirely to flashbacks that have almost no connection to the main narrative, which leaves only 6 real episodes to cover the entire storyline of a game that takes about 20 hours to finish. The result is a narrative pace that judges others awkwardly from morbidly obese Glacier to hyperactive 6-year-old after 2 cans of Red Bull. The 2 flashback episodes only add to the problem by delving into self-indulgent backstory that didn't really need to be told. I defended episode 3 at the time because I thought it was well acted and poignantly written, but even I'll admit that it didn't really need to be there, especially when we were still getting to know the main characters at that point.
That's true.
But by far the worst offender was episode 7, which tries to awkwardly crowbar in a piece of superfluous DLC content from the games. It goes nowhere and adds nothing of value, and generally took me out of what should have been a gripping point in the story.
Alright, okay, so I agree with him and I disagree. I agree because the pacing did feel off in certain moments. Episode 3, while a great episode, you could take that episode out, and while yes, they do need his truck and all that kind of stuff, you could kind of take it out and you could make up a different way of going about that. But it still works. It's in a weird spot in the season, but it still works. Episode 7, I thought it worked because even once I played the game and got there, I was like, oh, like that was like a really good segue into that. And it gave you a different look at Ellie. Like Ellie, she's so, stone faced, and she's trying to stay, kind of, hard when it comes to how she reacts to people and speaks to people, and she kind of stays away from people, things of that nature, even though her and Joel, they become very close throughout this adventure. But I don't know if you can call it that, but this mission, seeing this aspect, like you kind of saw more of a softer side of her. One, because she likes her friend Riley, obviously, but you saw a different side of Ellie, and that I liked because I didn't really like Bella Ramsey in the role as Ellie. Overall, episode 5 is where I feel like she really came and shined in the role, and I was like, okay, she's making it her own. But it did feel very different from the video game counterpart, where Pedro Pascal's Joel, I felt like he was Joel in the show. I felt like I was seeing the same version from the game in the show, and Bella was a little bit different with her portrayal of Ellie to me. Like there were some of the same lines obviously delivered, but in some cases it didn't land as well. But I liked this episode as far as episode 7 because you saw a different version of Ellie, and you saw that, yes, there is a softer side of Ellie in there. And if they didn't show that, they just did the same thing as a game and talked about, she talked about Riley at the end, I don't think it would have the same impact, because now we got to see it first instead of, seeing the show and then seeing maybe a DLC extra episode later on. I feel like putting it in the show or in the season was fine. It was fine. To me, a little bit better as far as the placing than episode 3. I'll give them that because we already got to kind of know Ellie at this point. Now we're seeing a different side of her. Whereas episode 3 comes, we're still kind of figuring Joel and Ellie out in the beginning stages. And then we have this episode that fully focuses on these two guys and what they go through for 20 years. That's just a couple of my thoughts on that. Let's continue.
And I can't shake the feeling that it was included to stroke Neil Druckmann's ego rather than elevating the narrative. Ellie's gay, by the way. On the subject of Ellie,
By the
one
way.
of my initial gripes were the clumsy attempts to make her a strong, empowered girl boss right off the bat, instead of earning that kind of development later, and the general unsuitability of the actress playing her. She always seemed to be the one in charge of every conversation, able to win every argument, cope with things that others couldn't, and telling Joel when it was time to move out like she was the real leader of the expedition. It was annoying because the desire to make her Joel's equal the moment they meet each other ultimately undercut the shift in dynamics that happens later in the story. But now that I've made it to the end, I can say that things at least do improve as the story progresses.
Sure.
The show gives her some moments of genuine vulnerability and emotion that she badly needed.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
she
God.
still makes a point of
Gets
doing
me
the
every
exact
time.
opposite
Jeez.
of what Joel says in almost every situation, proving that there's a fine line between being an independent, strong-willed adolescent and a stubborn, annoying arsehole that puts everyone's lives in danger because she won't listen to people who know more than her.
Constantly
And yeah,
happening.
Bella Ramsey resembles Ellie about as much as I look like Jennifer Lopez. And her acting range could charitably be described as specific. I'm still not convinced that she was the right choice for the role, but overall, I have to admit that she did at least grow on me as the season progressed.
And I'll say this too. Ellie in the game, when they have the moment where Joel's injured, he gets, not stabbed, but impaled more or less because he falls on the bar. And then she's taking care of him. And she has to go and do the hunting. She has to pretty much fend for herself when David and his men start coming after them. It felt earned because there was other moments of the game where Joel is kind of teaching her how to shoot. We see that, we feel it. We then take control of Ellie and we fight infected and clickers and all that kind of stuff. It felt so earned, and it felt good. It felt realistic, like in that way. Where in this show, we don't really get that moment with her. Like the moment between her and David, all that happens so fast, and they don't have the battle against any clickers to kind of like show that she's able to fend for herself. I never believed that this version of Ellie, at least Bella Ramsey's Ellie in the show, could kind of take care of herself to a degree. Or when she talks to David and James in the way that she does, and she's kind of, really controlling the situation when she has a rifle. I didn't believe it here. I believed it on the game, because in the game, she's on it. This one, I'm like, no, she's faking it till she makes it, and it's working. But I don't believe it, because I didn't get to see those other things happen prior to make me believe that she could actually fend for herself. So yeah, that was a little bit of a missing point that the show didn't take advantage of, that the game did, I thought, very well.
Most of the heavy lifting, though, was left to Pedro Pascal, who does a solid job with the material he's given. I say that because there's a definite distinction between the game and TV versions of Joe, and Pascal's version is clearly a different spin on the character, less assertive and dominant,
To a
more
degree,
damaged,
but it still works.
traumatized and unsure of himself, and starting to slow down as age takes its toll. There's times when he comes dangerously close to being weak and whiny, like you begin to wonder how he even made it this far in such a world, but somehow the script always manages to pull it back just before I get totally disengaged. And well, the final episode proves that he's still very much a force to be reckoned with if you cross him.
Exactly.
Another thing that kind of bothered me were the infected, in that, well, we really don't get much of them.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, because for a post-apocalyptic zombies show, we're a bit light on the old zombies.
Yep.
They tend to show up on their own for little jump scares when it's time to write someone out of the story, but apart from a big blowout action scene in episode 5, they basically fade into the background for the rest of the season. Again, I can't help but think that cutting out those 2 superfluous flashback episodes would have freed up a lot of time and money to work in a bit more tension and action scenes.
So that was the thing for me. I felt almost like, was there not enough money to bring clickers and bloaters and all that kind of stuff back? We get them in episode 5. I want to say they show up in episode 6. Like, they show up sporadically here and there, but nothing like episode 5 happens at all again in the rest of the episodes. You got 4 more episodes after this, after episode 5, the big zombie clicker scene, whatever the case, that's happening there. And it's great, but you don't get anything else like that. And it's more that the humans are more of the villains. Obviously, same like Walking Dead. We get the same thing. And I was wondering if it was going to kind of go that route. It went very season 6 of Walking Dead, like Negan and stuff, pretty quick. David kind of being the Negan of this season, more or less. He's kind of the boss battle of the game, really. So seeing how they do it here, you almost forget that this is a post-apocalyptic world with clickers and bloaters and all these different things happening, the cordyceps, all that. You almost forget that that's even a threat, because it almost seems like things get pretty easy and you don't see them anymore. And I wish that they had shown up in the David episode, because that would have been a really cool scene as far as lifting Ellie up more to believe that she could actually, fend for herself to a degree. But also just to bring more excitement to the episode. Like, the episode was good, but things happened so fast, and I feel like there wasn't as much tension outside of obviously the people being cannibals and not really knowing, and David going after her. I don't know. I just feel like there could have been more as far as action and as more spectacle, and having a clicker battle would have been a welcome situation, at least for me.
There's also this weird reluctance to engage with the morality of the world that they're living in. Like, at one point a character keeps referring to the military government of the quarantine zones as fascists, but when Ellie points out that they're literally the only thing holding human society together, her only answer is, "You're so annoying when you argue like this." Off, Riley. This is an important point that needs to be addressed, you self-righteous spam sandwich. If you represent the terrorist group that wants to overthrow the government, then you need a better justification than, "I just don't like them because they order people around."
Sure.
I mean, what's to say that you
But
guys
she's a
would be
kid.
any better at running things? Do you have some kind of master plan for how to manage dwindling resources and keep the infected at bay? Ellie's gay, by the way. When Ellie encounters a group of cannibals, she's bluntly asked what she would do if she was in their situation. situation. Would she watch her entire community starve to death, or would she contemplate the unthinkable to keep them alive? The thing is, there's no particular attempt to frame this as the desperate actions of a group pushed to breaking point. It's just dismissed as evil and then wiped away with a big fight scene before Ellie or the audience has a chance to think about it. There's also a weirdly out-of-place scene where one character in an isolated farming community proudly declares that they're communists because everyone's expected to pull their weight and contribute to the group.
True.
Nah, it ain't like that.
It is that, literally. This is a commune. We're communists.
That's not communism, that's survival. That being said, most of these gripes are really just minor criticisms in an otherwise solid adaptation.
Yeah.
The big question was, would The Last of Us keep the perfectly balanced, awesomely ambiguous ending to the game that brought the main character's storyline full circle and posed a bunch of fascinating moral questions without trying to push the audience either way? Or would it try to reshape it to better accommodate the events of the second game? Well, I'm pleased to say that they got it right with this one, delivering a season finale that hits all the same emotional high points as the game, and wisely doesn't try to with what was already a great piece of writing. It's just as brutal, uncompromising, and perfectly structured, and ends on the same note of cautious, flawed optimism. Two people facing up to an uncertain future together, each willing to compromise for the sake of the other. Oh, if only they knew what was in store for them.
I still haven't played it yet.
Ultimately, The Last of
I
Us
still
is
haven't
not
played
the
it yet.
perfect adaptation we all wished
Not the
for,
second game.
and in most respects, I generally consider the game to be a richer and more satisfying piece of storytelling, but judging the show on its own merits, I have to admit they did a pretty good job overall. It's a well-written, well-acted, and often gripping post-apocalyptic drama that respects its source material and its audience. Imagine that in 2023. And if you're willing to go into it with an open mind and see it as what it is, an adaptation of an existing piece of source material, then well, I think you're probably going to get something out of The Last of Us. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Again, I really enjoyed this show. I know we've kind of talked about it throughout, so you already kind of know where I'm at. I really enjoyed this show. I looked forward to watching it every Sunday. Were there a couple episodes here and there that didn't hit as well as episode 5? For sure. I thought episode 3 was great. Again, you could take it out, and I don't think it would have that much bearing on it as far as the characters. But episode 5 is my favorite episode. That's the best one. Episode 6 is also really good too, but episode 5 is kind of the highlight. That's the pinnacle for me. Episode 9 is good, but everything happens pretty quickly, similar to the David episode, which was episode 8, right? Things just kind of happen a little too fast. And I think that's just because for me, having had played the game as the show was going and finishing things out, it's just a different experience playing the game and being these characters and kind of, obviously going through the action, trying to get to the destination at hand, and understanding why Joel makes the decision that he makes, being more or less a surrogate parent to Ellie. So it just plays out a little bit differently, and obviously it's an adaptation, so that's just how it's going to be. But I did feel like there were some little things here and there missing that they could have added to add either a little more spectacle or just a little bit more, I don't know, not drama, more or less like with the whole scene with Joel going after Ellie and killing everybody. It felt more like a montage than like us actually being there and there being any tension. He just gunned everybody down. It was like so easy. He never got hurt, nothing. And obviously in the game it's kind of similar, but you're more tactful in as far as how you go about it. You got different items that you're using to kind of get through the hospital. In this one, he just guns everybody down. It happens really quick. It was easy. So it's things like that, like adaptation wise, I'm like, hey, that's the way it goes. But I was kind of hoping for more in some of the scenes that did, just really well as far as how they played out in the video game. And you just feel it more. You connect to it a little bit more. Where here, there's moments where you kind of get disconnected and it's just not, I don't know. It's not as good. It's still good because the show's great. It's not as good. So I've still got to play The Last of Us 2. I've been watching a lot of clips on it, but I got to play it before season 2 comes out because apparently it's going to be it's going to be 2 seasons or 3 of The Last of Us. They're not going to do like a whole bunch, apparently, what I'm hearing. They'll do season 2, and apparently, you got Ellie, and there's an Abby. Is that a different character? I don't really know what's happening there. So I'll check it out. I'll play it. That way I'm ready for once this does start to film and they keep this out there for season 2. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below though. What did you think of The Last of Us, the show? Have you played the game? And what did you think of it if you haven't played the game and you watched it? What are your thoughts? Did you connect to it maybe in a different way than I did, having played it? And those of you that have played it multiple times, what were your thoughts on the show? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Appreciate you guys as always. And check out some other videos right down here from the channel. We can laugh together. We can learn together, whatever the case. Check those out. Also, check out more videos from Critical Drinker on his channel as well. Link in the description for the original video for this one. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next video. Take care.